Hey, Daniel Brown here. We're going to be talking about the trends for 2026 and what to look out for. So, if you're looking at from 2025, there's been quite a bit of chaos and uncertainty, and there's probably going to be the future going forward. So, I'm looking at 2026 and seeing what are the trends that are likely to be happening. So, I've used a combination of archetypal analysis, so essentially pattern recognition, looking at what are the archetypes that are happening now and what's likely to happen in the future. Some of it's obvious pattern recognition, some of it is intuitive as well. But just let's, so I'm going to take you through my understanding and my interpretation and what to look out for. So the good thing when you're looking at archetypes is once you identify the archetypes that are occurring in the world, then you can extrapolate because archetypes form a pattern. So you can actually predict the future by understanding the archetypes that are existing now and then working towards them. And that also enables you to see what is required. So whatever archetypes show up, it shows you what's actually required. So the two things that are happening then, so which are quite obvious. So one is the increasing rollout of AI, and of course that's going to accelerate in 2026. So if you look at archetypally what's going on, this is the archetype of the pioneer. So the pioneer is about change, transformation, and this is big pioneer energy. So if you see the pioneer coming, this means that anything that's aligned with that change is going to do well. But behind that, there's actually we have the archetype of the destroyer. There's a lot of destruction. So if you look at the archetype of the destroyer like a volcano, there's destruction. Something is destroyed, and then whenever at the aftermath of a volcano, then new life emerges. So this is what we're going to see. It's similar to what we had in the Industrial Revolution, like letting go of releasing the old ways and moving into new ways. So this is what we're seeing, and that's kind of obvious. So if you haven't, I think it's obvious for most people, but some people will have their head in the sand and not be able to see that. But essentially, this is the archetype. This is the pattern that's happening. So I don't want to talk about that one because that's quite obvious and there's not much we can do about that. But let's talk about the other emerging stream. So stream number two. Okay, stream number two is, and we're experiencing as well, it is this. So archetypally, we describe this as the archetype of the storyteller. So what is a storyteller? The storyteller is about narrative, and it's how one expresses truth, story, through symbols, through conversation. And as you can see now, there's all of these culture wars are happening. So all of this narrative that is where one, and this ties in the shadow of the shadow of storyteller is actually telling untruths. So the storyteller in the positive is about conveying truth and story through symbolism and conveying truth and information via story in ways that speak to people. Now, when we get to the shadow, that is telling untruths. So using the power of story to tell untruths. So we're out now, as you can see, and I'm sure you're aware, we're in this narrative where no one really knows what's true. And this is kind of disrupting ourselves spiritually, but also mentally. It's creating this mental uncertainty, this psychic overload or mental overload. And this is the emergence of the storyteller archetype in play. And this is the storyteller on steroids. So all of these narratives, these culture wars, and you can see them. There's propaganda happening. There's so much stuff is happening. And obviously with AI, that's going to get even worse. So we're going to get to a point, and this is why we're talking 2026 and beyond. As AI improves, we're going to get to the point where images that we see on or videos we see in our news we cannot be trusted as AI gets better because everything can be faked. And we're already talking about fake news. So imagine in the future that gets even worse, and that's what there is to expect. So this is something that is not something we can change, not something we can stop. That's just the way that it's going to happen. So what is underneath that? So with everything that's happening, there's always something underneath that or something deeper at play. So this narrative and storyteller, what we're being called for is to increase our consciousness. And this is where we move into the healer archetype. So this is about raising the consciousness of humanity. Because if you think about it, we get to a point where, and this is going to be a year or 2 years' time, where everything we see on screen cannot be believed. The other thing we can believe is what's in person. And then if we fast forward even further, when you have androids who can impersonate people, then we won't even be able to trust who's who. So how do we deal with that? How do we navigate that? This is where consciousness comes in. Because as you increase your level of consciousness, then we are able to sense more. So our psychic senses, our intuitive senses start opening up. And we have them already. So for example, if you walk into a room where two people have had an argument, you can sense the argument. You're sensing the emotions and the tension in the air. So we naturally do that, and some people are better than others. So if you do that, but you don't really experience being intuitive or being psychic. Imagine that power, but on steroids. So that is the power we have, and that doesn't just work in person. It actually can work on screen. It's something that I do. I can just look at an image. I can tune into that image, and I can feel whether that image is true or not, and if that is a real person or not. And you can even pick up information about that person. And this is where science comes in, because quantum physics, maybe it's say the science or not, there's some principles of quantum physics. So for example, distance actually is not an object, we're all connected at some level. So distance doesn't actually matter. So our intuition works over distance. We're all connected. So ultimately, when we increase our consciousness, we realize that nothing can be hidden. And that's where we need to be at, where nothing can be hidden, because then that's the only way you're able to see truth. And it's also when you're able to see what's AI and what's not. So imagine you're watching a video, and some whatever video is, someone committing a crime, a president committing a crime, and then that president says, "Oh, that's fake news," or head of state, doesn't have to be the president. And people eventually will get to a point where they can tune in and tell whether that video is real or fake. You can sense that actually happened. You can sense the energy of that happening. So that's one view. Or if someone is lying, at some point when our consciousness increases, we can tell that person is lying. A lot of us can anyway, on a face-to-face basis, but sometimes it requires effort. But in the future, when our consciousness is raised, we will know instantly. So we cannot be fooled. So that's what we're being called for. If you see, or called towards. So if you see where we're developing, people are getting caught up in the morass of like storytelling, narrative, culture wars, and we're going to be in this point until we move into higher levels of consciousness where we cannot be fooled by any of those culture wars. Everything is going to be very transparent and very quickly. So that is where we're going to in that stream. So that stream is the narrative of storyteller, which is causing us to move into elevating our consciousness. So people might call that the ascension. I don't like to use those words because I like to just make things a bit more specific, but one could say that's an ascension process. So that's the other strand. Okay. So then, given that's the strand, so those are the two streams, the AI stream and the stream of consciousness, where we're elevating consciousness. How do we navigate that? So those are the two background archetypal patterns. So next is the archetypes that we need, or the archetypes that emerge, are going to deal with that. So with the AI, which is the easiest one, and I'll probably do a separate one on this, and actually more interested in the storyteller archetype, because it's more where we have some power over. But in the AI strand, that's really about aligning with technology, but seeing the truth of what's going on, not putting our head in the sand, understanding what it does, and then consciously choosing how one wishes to participate in that. There's not a lot that we can do except raise our consciousness again with the healer. So that's that stream. So then the other stream is our call to increase consciousness. What do we do there? So in of that, we have three main archetypes that emerge. So let's talk, and these are the visionary, the bully, and the priest. So these are the archetypes that will essentially thrive in this atmosphere. So storyteller and healer will thrive. They're part of the narrative, but essentially the three archetypes I mentioned, the priest, the visionary, the bully, these are the ones that are really going to stand out. So let's go with the visionary first. So the visionary is when you have tough times. So if you imagine this whole storytelling narrative, it's like we're living in this cloud of confusion. There's so much narrative, so much social media, so much talk. It's like our minds can't really function. It's like we're living in this fog, like this external fog of conversation and what's true, what's not true. Your mind is always trying to work out, okay, someone said that, I need to fact check that. Is that right? Was that right? I don't know. Am I being fooled? Am I being given the whole truth? What's behind the truth? So there's this fog because you're always questioning everything, which is good. But when you're questioning everything and you can't trust certain sources, it destabilizes your psyche. And so we're living in this kind of fog. With that fog also, there's this uncertainty now, what's going to happen? people cannot make plans for the future. So along comes the visionary archetype, and the visionary is always useful in times of change. And interesting enough, with in the UK, which is where I'm from, like we've been calling for a visionary prime minister for a very long time, and we haven't had one, and that's why we've kind of been stagnating. So when things are getting dire, the visionary always comes in and says, "Hey, I can lead you past where we are to a new future." So that's what's required. We need people who are visionaries to come forward and show us what's beyond the fog that we're in. So that's the archetype of the visionary. So visionaries are popping up now. So we've seen what I call false visionaries as well. These are the people who are basically creating visions and selling visions, but visions which are not based on truth. So a lot of narratives that are happening, or lots of politicians, populists essentially coming up and sharing, this is my vision for the future and this is what's happened, but that's not based on truth because it hides some of the negative consequences that will happen. The whole truth is not being given, and good visionaries will include everyone, and the truth and the vision is actually a positive vision. With the populists, the visions they come out with are not, one, they're not based fully on truth, they're not feasible, and also they're very destructive. So a true visionary, a visionary in the light, can actually see beyond and create futures that actually inspire everyone. With those type of visionaries, the more people get behind those visions because they're more aligned with truth. So these are the type of visionaries that we're looking at. So the New York mayor is an example of a visionary. And I'm not going to get into the politics of what's right or what's wrong, but more you can see the energy of hope that he brought by standing. And he was bullied, which I'll talk about, the bully archetype, and I'll talk about in a minute. But his vision was strong enough that it gave people hope, and people see a way past. So that's what we're going to see more of, more visionaries. And hopefully we see more empowered visionaries who really are able to lead people to a new world. So I'm talking visionaries in politics, but that happens in business, can happen on any scale. And small scale, visionary in your family, vision in your business, visionary in your industry. So the visionary is called for at all levels, so we all can be visionaries. There is a certain type of visionary and there's a certain process of visionary. And actually, I think I'll do a video on that, because with every archetype, there are stages that one needs to go through. There are initiation periods. So definitely there's a visionary, an initiation period of visionary. And it's not easy to be a visionary, which is why there are not that many visionaries coming forward all of the time. So that is one of the archetypes of the visionary. Okay, so then number two, what is number two? It is the priest. So the priest is someone who brings higher consciousness, spirituality to the masses, who is the conduit for spirituality. So archetypes go beyond specifics. So we're not talking religion here, although the priest is classically religious character, but it doesn't have to be religious. You can have a priest in the business context, the priest in politics. The priest is archetypal. So fundamentally, we're bringing spiritual energy and light to the world. So anyone can bring light. You don't actually have to be a priest. But essentially, the priest archetype is people who are going to bring light to people. So if you think where everyone is in this confusion, they're in this fear, they're in this depression, the visionary is going to bring light in. It's going to bring hope. It's going to make people feel better. It's going to reconnect them to source energy, reconnect them to the light. So this is what we're going to see more of. So who are the priests? They can be politicians. They can be they can be coaches. They can be psychologists. So there's a lot of movement of therapists, mental health. So a lot of these who are bringing light and bringing understanding are the priest archetypes, essentially channeling. They can be astrologers. They can be industry evangelists. They could be heads of B Corps. So we're seeing now with the priest archetype, people are bringing light. People are bringing hope. As I said, it's not in religion, and it can be, and we will see more religious priests, but actually an archetype goes beyond the specifics. It's symbolic, it's not literal. So we will see more priest archetypes coming in. So essentially, if you're coming forward, then if you want to make it big in 2026 and beyond, if you want to do well, then you want to align whatever you're in, so your business, your organization, what you're doing personally, if you align yourself with either the visionary, so you're creating a vision for other people, or you're bringing light. So light can be being a light worker or bringing positivity to many people. these are the archetypes that are going to excel in the world, and this is how you're going to be able to navigate. And it's going to take some courage to step up. It's not easy to be either the visionary or the priest, but if you're aligning with them, and it doesn't mean you have, also just to point out, it doesn't mean you have to be a visionary archetype, it doesn't mean you have to be a priest, it just means that find your own expression of that or align with that. So you might work for a visionary organization, or you might partner with visionary organizations, you might support a visionary organization or a visionary leader, you might partner with an industry or have clients who are priests and you're bringing light to them, or you might just be bringing that light in yourselves to other people. So those are the two archetypes that if you align with, you will do well in 2026, and it will give you it will make it easier for you to navigate. So then what else is there? So then what we're also seeing is the rise of the bully archetype. So as you can see in this chaos and confusion, people start to exert their power because they can get away with it. So in the UK, there's more shoplifting than there were before, because there's less oversight, there's less of the community coming together because everyone's engaged in their stuff and everyone is kind of distracted, so to speak. So then it leaves a vacuum for people to abuse power. And obviously we're seeing it in the global scale as well. The wars that we're having. So all of these bullies are coming out. So what we'd be called to do with the bullies, you can either observe, let them get away with it. You can either be bullied, or you can stand up. So obviously with the bully archetype, we're being called to stand up. So with the bully archetype, one can be a bully, and that's not what I'm advocating, but we must confront the bully as well. And that is the key thing. We must confront the bully. So everywhere there's abuse of power, we must confront the bully. So, but it's difficult, right? So I remember bullies at school, like usually they're the big ones, and you fear standing up to them because they are stronger than you, they have more power than you. So, you know, we are now being forced to confront our fears. So I'm going to talk a bit more about the bully, but this is what we're seeing. So we have to respond to the bully, and we can do that by increasing our resilience, increasing our level of power, or coming up with community. But I will do a specific one, specifically the bully, and actually all of these archetypes. But when you know that the bully archetype is coming up, then it gives you something to do. It gives you something to understand. The bully archetype is coming up. I know that I need to respond to the bully coming up. And it's interesting because I think earlier in the year when I was seeing all this abuse of power, it put me into this hopelessness. I was like, oh my God, like what is going on? Like, why are people abusing all this power? And I was kind of just sitting there complaining. And then when I saw from an archetypal perspective, it's the bully. It's like, I haven't, and it's interesting because I haven't seen the bully since I was a child. So I was like, how does one deal with the bully? What is the archetype of the bully? And when you understand the archetype of the bully, then you understand what one needs to do in order to overcome the bully. And I'll talk about that more due course. But just knowing the fact that the archetype of the bully is coming up means that gives you a way to respond. And that actually is the power of the archetypes. When you see that an archetype is emerging, all you need to do is understand the archetype, and then you'll find ways to deal with that archetype. Because archetypes have shadow and they have light. So whichever archetype comes up, there's going to be a light aspect, there's going to be a shadow. So for example, the archetype of the bully, the light aspect is it is an empowering because we need to respond to the bully. When we respond to the bully, we actually increase our level of power and self-esteem because we are stepping into our own power. If we allow ourselves to be bullied, then we are actually being in the shadow of that, because then we are allowing ourselves to have our power reduced. And similarly, also when we might even have the bully, we might be the bully. So then we are the bully. Then the shadow for us is to look at where we might be bullying, and to maybe get to the source of that and see why that is, and overcome that internal desire to bully others. So those are the archetypal themes. So it's funny, I probably should have shared why I'm sharing this, but it's interesting because I did this analysis I did during COVID. Because during COVID, it was like, oh my God, this is crazy time. Like, what the hell is going on? How does one navigate COVID? So I did this archetypal analysis, and it made it very easy to understand. So during COVID, that was the archetype of the plague. So we've had plagues in the past, obviously not for a long time, but we had the Spanish flu, we had Black Plague, so a bubonic plague. So when COVID hit, it was like, okay, we have the archetype of the plague. Then we look at, okay, if we have this archetype, how do we respond to this archetype? So that had particular challenges. So it was about health, it was about financial survival, it was about how to deal with all of this change. So when I actually, interesting enough, when I did that analysis, I created a couple of courses. One was about the victim, because under COVID we were all victims, so that it brought out in a victim. And with the victim archetypes, how one responds to being a victim. Like, we could not do anything about being a victim of COVID, but we could deal with like the response to that and step into the empowered victim in that state, or we could fall to being the victim. So that was COVID. That was, so when you look at a particular situation, it allows you to then, and I'm showing this example, when you see a particular situation happening in the world, then when you look at the archetypes that are occurring, that allows you to respond by understanding in COVID with the victim is like, oh, we're being challenged with the victim, so let's deal with the whole world of being a victim. And that's what we did during COVID. So now we're in a different period, which is chaos, confusion. We may be seeing empires shifting, changing, maybe falling, maybe rising, but it's an age of tumultuous times. And there is a playbook by that. And if you understand the archetypes, then you can see the playbook of that. So that is the advantage of using archetypal analysis. Then you can predict what's happening in the future. You can understand the whole world of those archetypes, and then you can actually do something about it. So this hopefully, so I hope you've got some information on how to respond to what's going on for 2026. So if we step into understand what's going on in the world, and when you understand it, step into it. So at the beginning of the year, when all this was going on, I was coming up with a lot of fear and confusion. But once I distinguished the archetypes and distinguished the patterns, it's like, right, I know what to do. So my advice then is take some time to see what's coming up, how one responds to these archetypal patterns. And in my next video, I'll be talking more in depth about all of these 3 archetypes and what one can do. So that is the guide to 2026. Tumultuous times, but if we align ourselves with our inner visionary, our inner priest bringing the light, and if we learn to stand up to bullies, then we will be able to navigate what is happening. So that's my prediction for 2026. And it may be even crazier. So if there's some other theories, then who knows what could happen, but I'm not going to go there. I'm just going to stick with this, and we'll see whatever shows up. So if you'd like to know more, subscribe to my channel, check out my website on resources that can help, and stay tuned for other videos. Thank you.